This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Athletics is Africa's medal breadbasket at the Olympic Games. Now the best talent in track, field and road running across the continent is training for the Tokyo Games this summer after the global pandemic curtailed their ambitions last year. However, the dark shadow of anti-doping violations continues to stalk African runners. Tonight on Sports Scene, we look at some of the good, the bad and the ugly in the sport. Hello and a very warm welcome to you. This is the home of African sports news here on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up on this week's program. Kenyan coach O'Connell urges athletics to adapt to the new normal in this global pandemic. And South Africa star Caster Semenya turns to European Court of Human Rights in her push to compete at the Tokyo 2020 Games. Welcome to the program. Now, the 2020 Great Ethiopia Run was cancelled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the event hosted by legendary athlete Haile Gebrselassie got permission to go ahead this year, albeit with restrictions. Participants in Africa's biggest road race were greatly reduced with strict rules on face masks and social distancing enforced. Here is CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi, who gets us underway.
Kebere Daniel has taken part in every great Ethiopian run.
I've made it without any problems for the last 20 years. I'm proud of the organizers in my country.
For some, it was the first time.
It was a bit challenging. The turnout was good. The hills, I think on 7 kilometers and 5K, they were really intense, but we managed to do it.
In the past, runners all started the race at the same time. This year, however, there were 3 different groups easily identified by the color of their t-shirts, and each ran at different times in order to avoid runners crowding together. The managers of the run say that COVID-19 has forced them to be flexible.
So we need to see how to add televised events, how to do events both here and virtually so other people internationally can join. So there is a lot of learning and we will continue, but we have to do a lot of learning and kind of also adjust our working, whether it's a number of team we have, whether it's how we deliver events. So we need to take a lot of learning.
12,500 people took part in this year's annual event, way below the 45,000 that took part in 2019.
We were aiming 50,000 for our 20th anniversary, and when COVID comes and when we were trying to reschedule, we say, shall we have 20,000? Now there was this guideline from the Ministry of Health that says you cannot have more than 25% of the maximum capacity. So there is a lot of learning, it's just being prepared.
Although many were not able to get a place in the run, some did not attempt to register for fear that the large crowds were not safe. The Great Ethiopian Run has already formed virtual running groups to enable people in different parts of the world to participate in the over 7 events they hold in a year. But many admirers of the fun that the physical mass gatherings attract hope that with the COVID-19 vaccine, they'll be able to return to the old normal. But the uncertainty that looms over the arrival of the vaccines in Africa will make it hard for many such events to be planned soon. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
While the postponement of the Tokyo Olympic Games frustrated many athletes who were showing early season form in the build-up to the event last year. But with the event moving to this summer, medal prospects like African 100 meters champion Akani Simbine have had to take stock and adjust their preparations. CGTN CS Duplessis with more.
All eyes will be on Africa's fastest man when he lines up at the Olympics in Tokyo next year. His blistering start to 2020, a personal best of 9.91 seconds, and the fastest time on South African soil, was an Olympic lead time and made him the man to beat until the pandemic brought all athletics meets to a standstill.
This year for me, when we started our first race, I was on fire. I felt like this is actually my year because that was the fastest time I've ever ran. And then we got hit with the lockdown and just had to change the mind a bit and just try to figure out what we're doing. And it worked out at the end, you know. I'm really happy about it. I'm really happy about the year.
At the Rio Olympics, the South African 100-metre champion came agonisingly close to a spot on the podium, finishing 5th, 300ths of a second off third place. Since then, he has taken the experience in his stride.
I learned a lot from those 4 years. I learned, like, you know, I need to relax. From Olympics, I took that I need to relax at the end of the race, you know. From 2017, I said to myself, okay, you know what, I'm that close. I just need to work just a little bit harder and just push myself a little bit harder. And from last year, it was just, you know, I need to fight to the end, you know. And I think for me, that was the 4 big things that actually I was missing, and now I feel like I have.
But the 27-year-old admits he is no longer the shy guy just aiming for a place in the final. His lofty ambitions include claiming a spot on the podium and making history in the famous 100-metre race in Tokyo.
It's a very respected position, you know, and no one can take that away from me. You know, if I go to the Olympics and I win the gold medal for the 100 meters, you know, no South African has ever done that, no African has ever done that. And when I stand on the line, I'm not just representing South Africa, I'm representing the whole continent, you know, and that's a really big thing. And, you know, I take upon that myself, and, you know, I want to do the country proud and I want to do the continent proud.
Africa's fastest man started 2020 with a personal best before the pandemic brought a halt to his momentum. But luckily, the 27-year-old managed to squeeze in 4 European races where he was undefeated. Simbine's final race in Rome, a sub-10-second 100, has given him the confidence and belief to dream big in 2021, where Olympic gold is very much in his sights. CS Duplessis, CGTN, Johannesburg.
Now to Cameroon, where we meet Stephanie Nju Nsela, a 24-year-old sprinter who was among the few to excel in her sport last year. That's despite the pandemic. She's now aiming to make a big impact this summer at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. CGTN's Joy Kiruki tells us more.
Stephanie Nju Nsela rose to prominence last year when she won the 100-metre and 200-metre sprint double silver at the International Grand Prix. The athlete, who competes for the Armed Forces, Police of Cameroon and University of Douala, managed to shine amid the global pandemic.
The period was very difficult, but I trained in my neighborhood with my coach while respecting the barriers and social distancing. The coach gave me instructions from a distance and I did what he told me. I will do strength training sessions on a hill to build up some muscle with some acceleration and speed exercises. This is how I fought to win medals during this difficult time.
In 2019, Stephanie was Cameroon's double sprint champion, a feat that saw her crowned the best female athlete of the same year. The pandemic, however, curtailed her plans of making an international impact last year as she expressed concerns about the second wave of COVID-19.
In 2020, COVID-19 caused me to dip in performance due to lack of training and competition. It also played on my passion to rub shoulders with top athletes. I am very afraid of losing my Cameroon title and my form.
Stephanie is determined to further her progression this year, with qualification for the Summer Tokyo Olympics high on her agenda.
My ambitions for the year 2021 is to stay focused, to continue working hard, and I hope that COVID-19 will disappear completely so that we can continue with our activities normally. I intend to compete against the top athletes and win more medals in the next competitions.
Hailing from a family of athletes in Douala, the economic metropolis of Cameroon, Stephanie is aiming at becoming one of the best of her generation. With a bachelor's degree in media and social communication recently obtained at the University of Douala, the young athlete will soon embark on a professional career. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Now, after a 2020 season decimated by the global pandemic, athletics hopes to clock a fruitful campaign in 2021. That's amid restrictions, with the track, field and road season set to climax at the Summer 2020 Olympics. Here are other select events that will be the highlight of the athletics calendar this year. You're watching Sports Scene here on CGTN. Stay with us as we take a short break. Here's what's coming up when we return. Kenyan coach O'Connell urges athletics to adapt to the new normal during this global pandemic.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Welcome back. Now, Kenyan athletics is only just starting up after a devastating disruption caused by the coronavirus pandemic. The country is gradually opening up the sport, and as renowned athletics coach Colm O'Connell recounts, athletics could be forced to change to adapt to the new normal. CGTN's Sadiq Shaban has more.
This is a morning routine and ritual at the St. Patrick's Athletics Camp in Iten, Kenya. Coach Colm O'Connell meets his trainees, a group of 4, for the day's training. Brother Colm, as is famously known, recounts how COVID-19 has disrupted the sport for the last 1 year.
During the lockdown again, my own particular small group of elite athletes had to go to their homes, social distance, and of course that was during the main months in which the virus was rampant. And then we were allowed to bring back small groups of athletes, maybe 3 or 4, maximum 5, to continue with the training.
This is a new normal for Brother Colm and many athletics coaches in Kenya at the moment. The big number of athletes in training camps is gone. The virus has wiped away the old training regime and installed a new reality.
Nobody expected this happening. Nobody expected this COVID to come along and cause such a huge disruption. So I think this is also the opportunity for us to pull back a little bit and see how we coach, how we train, how our programs are structured, and so that we can move forward, maybe in a new way rather than going back to the old normal, of how things were.
Brother Colm says the sport of athletics must adapt to new ways of survival as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. What the world previously knew about the sport, he says, including the close contact between the athletes and the fans, could well have been completely altered by the current wave of pandemic sweeping the world.
Are we going to be able to even get back to what we considered normal? Is there ever going to be a normal again? In a sense, we may even have to look at our youth program and say, what's the best way forward? Is it the traditional way that we have been using in the past through youth camps?
Colm O'Connell has trained some of the best Kenyan athletes over the years, including former Olympic champion and world record holder David Rudisha. 45 years since he relocated to Kenya, the Irish priest says he's not yet done with the sport. At 73, he still personally drives out every morning and supervises the training.
I made up my mind from the beginning that I'll stay at grassroots. I'll stay at this level. I'll stay nurturing young people, developing young people. And it has also kept me as a person motivated. New talent comes along. You finish with Rudisha, the next thing Ronix crops up, and so you're all the time challenged as a person. So in a sense, you don't get old that way. You don't get old in athletics. You might age in years, but you remain young. And young people keep you on your toes. You have to move with the young people. You have to move with the technology. You have to move with the times. So that has kept me involved as well.
The renowned coach says Kenyan athletics will need to have a soul-searching moment and find out the best ways to restart the sport safely across the age groups in the coming days. This is what the coronavirus pandemic has done to the training program of renowned athletics coach Col McCollum here in the Rift Valley region of Kenya. Ordinarily at a time like this training camp would be having a lot of athletes training and preparing for major events in the world. But this is his reality at the moment, and he says for over 30 years he's never seen anything like this. Sadiq Shaban, CGTN, in 10, Kenya.
Athletics apparel manufacturer Nike have pulled the plug on the sponsorship of long jump world champion Luvo Manyonga following his suspension over failing to notify the athletics integrity unit of his whereabouts. The South African star faces a potential 2-year ban over non-compliance with anti-doping officials' requests. CGTN's CS Duplessis has more.
Luvo Manyonga has had his fair share of highs and lows in the 30 years he has been alive. The former African champion has overcome a drug addiction and has turned his life around. He's enjoyed global success, but he's in hot water once again, and his latest setback has left his career hanging in the balance.
He now needs to go to disciplinary, and if he's got valid reasons, then he will get off. That's it in a nutshell. It's quite complicated, but that's it in a nutshell. If he doesn't have a valid reason, then that is strike one, and he's got 2 for the rest of the year, of the calendar year. It does obviously put a bit of pressure on him with regards to the Olympics this year, because now there's a cloud hanging over him, and now people are watching him even more closely. So it's a very dangerous predicament for Luvo to be in.
His former coach Neil Cornelius, who coached Manyonga to Olympic silver, believes that the afflicted athlete still possesses incredible talent and despite all odds is able to perform under pressure.
You know, one thing that Luvo always stood out was that guy's confidence. Honestly, those guys' confidence. He would show up to a meeting unprepared and you would know he would jump well. You would know he would qualify. He would know it as well. It's just from his confidence. There was nothing that could hold him back. He would have the worst day, the worst week, and that wouldn't impact him physically at all.
Should Manyonga somehow beat the provisional charge, he will then face an uphill battle to get in competitive shape, and then still will need to prove he has beaten his addiction demons that haunted him throughout his career. But there's no doubting his capabilities.
He has to get his mind right. He has to get rid of all the side distractions, whatever they may be, for him to be able to stand a chance. The shape he was in 2019, he finished 4th. There's no hope in hell he'll manage a medal if he's in that shape. The guys are jumping better and better all the time now. So Luvo has to up his game. Talent-wise, yes, absolutely. He could be a gold medal contender at the Olympics.
Luvo is such an amazing talent. He's such an amazing athlete, and he really has that big match temperament. Luvo knows how to perform at the right time, and I don't doubt it for a second. If Luvo comes back and he decides to really push for Olympics, he can, there's no doubt.
A dark cloud hangs over the future of the former World and Commonwealth Games long jump champion. His actions have not only led to a provisional suspension, but also seen a global sports apparel brand cut ties with him. He now needs to convince the integrity unit of World Athletics that he had a valid reason for missing the test, will face a 2-year ban, which will certainly spell the end of a checkered career for the man who claimed silver in Rio. CS Duplessis, CGTN, Pretoria.
Well, let's delve deeper into this topic now. CGTN's CS Duplessis joins us live from Johannesburg to break this down further for us. CS, what options are now available to Manyonga in his bid to salvage any hopes of competing in Tokyo?
Mahia, it doesn't look good for Luvo Manyonga. Unfortunately, he's in a bad place right now. He needs to go to the disciplinary hearing where he has to make a compelling case as to why he missed that test. If he, by some miracle, can convince the integrity unit that he's got a valid reason for missing that, then he has to get a coach, because at the moment he has no coach, he has no agent, he has no sponsors. And to be honest, a lot of people don't even know where Livu Manyonga is. So he's in a bad place at the moment. Remember, in 2012, he was suspended also for recreational drugs that were found in his system by the South African Institute for Drug-Free Sport. So he has had his demons along the way. But currently, the biggest obstacle facing Livu Manyonga is getting past that disciplinary hearing. There on out, he has less than 200 days to get into great shape, because we know talent-wise he's one of the best in the world. But unfortunately, he's been on a bad path since 2019, where the world champs finished, and then 2020 he was arrested for contravening lockdown regulations here in South Africa. His mom passed away, and many people unfortunately think that he's completely penniless at the moment. They even fear that he sold some of his medals to fund his lifestyle. But for Livu Manyonga, talent is through the roof. He's certainly one guy that can challenge for that gold medal. Unfortunately, the major obstacle is getting past that disciplinary first before anything else. His former agent has already said he'll take him back, as have the University of Pretoria's coaches. They'll welcome him back. All he needs to do is ask.
Right, and CS, it is only the second week of the year, and already 2 top African athletes have fallen foul of whereabouts rules violations. Should we be worried at this moment?
To be honest, at this stage, it feels like we're halfway through the year. Hasn't it been a demanding 2 weeks? But yes, certainly an area of concern. But it must be said, though, this is not something that is just African athletes to blame. It's a global problem. We all know that the whereabouts tests, if you think about Christian Coleman, you think of Salwan Nasser, these are top athletes, world champions that have been found out, they've been caught. So the whereabouts testing is certainly working. The blood passports are working. So that net is getting smaller. But it's not just a problem for Africa. This is a global problem, and it's a problem for sport in general.
And CS, it has been 11 years since the current whereabouts rules were introduced. Why has it taken so long for Africa to abide by them?
Oh, it's an interesting question, Mahia. You know, there's so many different reasons that we could point out, but you've got to say it's probably the resources available to Africa as opposed to places like Europe and the USA. But in general, you know, we've got to, tip our caps to the anti-doping authorities all over the continent, who are working tirelessly to catch these cheats. You know, speaking to a lot of journalists during the week about, various doping stories on the African continent, and they're convinced that at certain airports around Africa, there are people informing the athletes when, these anti-doping authority guys arrive. So these athletes then conveniently disappear, and it is easy to vanish in Africa. You think of cell phone signals, you think of all sorts of the vast spaces that these athletes can disappear in. But there is tireless work being done by the anti-doping authorities, and we wish them all the best, because at the end of the day, sport needs to get rid of the scourge that continuously rears its ugly head.
Indeed, a worrying situation as it stands. But CS, great to have you with us on Sports Scene. As always, CGTN's CS du Plessis joining us live from Johannesburg. Well, staying in the country, last November, Caster Semenya vowed to fight on against the DSTV regulations that prevent her from competing in the 400 meters to the mile distances. The global track star announced through her lawyers that she would head to the European Court for Human Rights and set her sights on competing in Tokyo. Here once again is CGTN's CS du Plessis.
Caster Semenya will never quit. That is the message from her longtime lawyer Greg Knott, who has been at her side since the beginning of the legal fight against the athletics body, as they set about trying to deny the 800-meter queen her right to compete in the 2-lap race.
Besides the doom and gloom of COVID, there's no doom and gloom in and around Caster. She's an indomitable spirit. She really is a fighter. And I've questioned her a number of times in regard to this latest move, and was she up for it? And she certainly really is up for the fight.
The world and Olympic champion maintains that her quest to compete in the distance she has dominated for over a decade is not just about her. It's about the next generation of athletes who may be subjected to the testing and discrimination she has faced throughout her stellar career.
We're doing it not only for Caster, and Caster knows this, and as she herself has said, it's for the generations that come from behind her. And it's those youngsters in her foundation and in her athletic foundation. She's doing it for a wider population, wider generation, and a wider vision. And that's really what Caster is about.
The move to head to the European Court for Human Rights is an indication that it is not just about sport, and that the 11 judges who are from significant countries who will preside over the proceedings later this year will elevate the profile for Caster Semenya immensely as she attempts to beat the DSD regulations imposed by World Athletics.
She is absolutely keen on the Olympic Games. In fact, keen is too weak a word. She's training for the Olympic Games. So I foresee seeing Caster on the track and certainly supporting her as a proud South African and as a proud human being as well.
The double Olympic champion has been fighting on the track and in the courtroom for over a decade. And as she celebrates her 30th birthday, she is far from done fighting. It will, however, require an enormous amount of energy, patience, and over $1 million to continue the fight. But the indomitable track star is not backing down as she fights for one last golden Olympic performance in Tokyo. CS Duplessis, CGTN, Johannesburg.
And that's where we leave it on this week's edition of Sports Scene. Thank you for watching. Do remember, if you'd like to get in touch with the program, do send your feedback to those contacts on your screen now and give us a follow on our digital media platforms. I'm Mahia Mutua. Thanks for watching. Before we leave you with our move of the week. Check this out. A dozen friends in Australia recently gathered for rope jumping, a stomach-churning adventure sport atop a cliff about 60 meters above the ocean where one jumps into the abyss.